Are you undiagnosed? You're not sure what your gut symptoms mean or what gut issue you have, so you can make a plan of attack for ending this nightmare? Then you're going to want to watch this video. We're going to go over just about every single gut disease and condition that's out there. My name is Mike the Heal Your Gut Guy, and I used to have horrible Crohn's and colitis, and I fixed it by getting to the root cause. So SIBO stands for small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, and there's actually a new term that's popping up called small intestinal fungal overgrowth. This is the small intestine right here. So food comes down here, it goes into the stomach, it gets broken down, and then it gets digested and absorbed in the small intestine. And somebody with SIBO, they do this breathalyzer test thing, and they read your numbers and they say, oh, you have an overgrowth of bacteria in the small intestine, and that's what's causing your symptoms. Now, that's the main narrative, but I'm actually going to share with you what's actually going on here. I study Dr. Hammer's work. He was this brilliant German doctor, and he discovered everybody with something going on in their small intestine, or who had SIBO or SIFO, they would have a ring in their brain in the same location every single time. They always came in with symptoms after a traumatic event, every single time, even if the patient wasn't aware of it. And so what happens is the intestines start to develop extra gut cells to help that person digest a stressful situation in their life. But more particularly, to get nerdy about it, and I go into details way more on my website and my program, these extra gut cells, Dr. Hammer tested them, and they produced more potent digestive juices to help digest and absorb this hard to digest thing. So the thing that they won't tell you about the SIBO breath test, some people will get really high numbers, yet they won't have any symptoms, and then other people will blow high numbers, and then they'll have a ton of symptoms. Dr. Hammer explained that. When someone's conflict active for the first time, when they're like really stressed out about, oh, my girlfriend broke up with me, and they don't have symptoms yet, developing extra gut cells doesn't hurt, doesn't really produce noticeable symptoms. But when the conflict gets resolved, let's say you break up with your crazy girlfriend and you find a new girlfriend, then the body goes, I don't need these extra gut cells anymore, and it starts to get rid of them, and it's a bloody, painful, mucousy process. And that's when somebody goes to the doctor and they're like, hey, there's blood flying out of my butt. Like, what's going on? So these bacteria, they make it sound like they're from outer space and that they're the enemy. But if you go down the terrain theory rabbit hole long enough, this doctor made a special microscope that could look at cellular organs. And he noticed that these so-called bad bacteria and fungi were coming out of our own cells. Everywhere in the body, they were coming out of our own cells. So those extra bacteria and fungi are helping break down these extra gut cells we don't need anymore. That's why there's high levels. While we're conflict active, there'll be high levels because those bacteria and fungi are like they're getting ready to like tear away at the cells the second we don't need them. It's very hard to diagnose SIBO unless you're getting like a breathalyzer test and SIFO. Candida is very similar, and again, it's like hard to get like an official Candida diagnosis. They have breath tests for that, but I think the main way that they do it is with a stool test, and they see if there's Candida in your stool. The same principle applies. It's controlled by your brain. I bought Candida from a lab. It costs like $20. Go Google it. You can buy it, grow it on some bread, sprinkle different things on it, and see what kills it. Oregano oil, essential oil, just one drop of it, Candida won't grow at all. Even when it's this black, huge fungal mass that looks like it's from outer space and could take over the planet. Blaming bacteria and fungi, blaming a messed up gut microbiome for your symptoms is like blaming firefighters for starting the fire. It's controlled from your brain, I'm telling you. I've seen people's symptoms stop overnight. I'm not exaggerating when I say overnight. Like somebody going to the bathroom like 10, 20 times a day, they find a few PTSD triggers. They cut it back to like going only 2 or 3 times a day. That's like hours of your life back and hundreds of dollars of toilet paper every year So we covered candida. Let's talk about diarrhea. What gives you diarrhea? Like, think about it for a second. What gives you diarrhea? What is going on with diarrhea? What is pushing, like, think about this in the wild. You just ran down, you're a cheetah, and you just ran down a gazelle. You just burned your 2,000 calories. And now you're eating, which in order, your pancreas and then all the muscles have to move. All stomach acid needs to be made. All this crazy stuff needs to happen just for you to digest some calories and get some nutrients. Why in the world would your body force it out? Why would your body do that? Why would it waste nutrients? Like it's a good recipe for starvation. Why would it do that? So what's really going on? Like what's the biological purpose of diarrhea? It's to get crap out of you as fast as possible, or to get toxins out of you as fast as possible. And I know some of you are eating super clean. And I know some of you are looking at your friends and family and going, they're not eating stuff that's super clean and they're not getting diarrhea. They're like, their body's not ejecting those toxins. Like, what's going on? Notice your language. Oh, what a load of crap. My boss, he's just full of crap. My boss is just full of crap. What if your boss puts a bunch of crap on your desk you got to do today? Oh, you got to work this weekend. Oh my God, I have a vacation and plans. Nope, here's a bunch of crap. You want to get fired? Here's this crap. You got to do this crap this weekend. Your brain's going to go, oh my God, there's crap we need to get rid of, but we can't. Okay, put the intestines into overdrive and get rid of it. That's what's happening. Well, it's actually showing it right here. There are muscles that go up and down, and side to side. And it can collapse in a second from a command from the brain. I think we got like 22 feet of small intestine, something like that. And then we got this colon right here. All it has to do is send one little signal and this all collapses. And then you got to go to the bathroom. That's what's causing diarrhea, the intestinal muscles. People think that maybe there's some bad bacteria in here creating some toxins, and then the body has to get it out really fast. But that is extremely rare. Like, you literally have to eat a bucket of sludge for that to happen. What's normally happening is you're experiencing figurative crap in your life, and your body needs to get it out as fast as possible. For me, it was people's stupid crap. All right, let's go to the other end. Constipation. What's happening with constipation? Again, this is the intestinal muscles. It's the only thing that can control this. And the best way I've seen this explained is in this book called The Human Colon. They were working on people who were so sick, their intestines were hanging out of them like this. Well, they had diarrhea when they were very angry. They would sit them on the table and they go, okay, let's talk about your favorite movie. And then they go, oh yeah, Star Wars was great. All the old books from like the 1970s that's when doctors were allowed to be doctors. Before the 1970s, doctors were allowed to be doctors and they were allowed to be scientists. They're not allowed to do that anymore. They have no free will anymore. They had these patients and they were sitting down and they're like, tell me about Star Wars. And oh yeah, Star Wars is so great and everything's fine. Their intestines are nice and pink. The intestinal muscles are moving boop, 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 boop. Let's pretend that's like the normal rhythm. And then they'd be like, okay, all right, enough about Star Wars. Tell me about your father. And then one guy would be like, oh, he yelled at me for getting bad grades. He's such a jerk. And then the intestines would start to turn red. They would start to bleed. And the intestinal muscles would start to go, they'd start to move really fast. And then he would get diarrhea. This same person who just had diarrhea 2 seconds ago, they would go, okay, tell me about, your girlfriend. And then he would go, oh, Susie left me. She's never coming back. He gets sad and depressed. And the intestines would go pale. Like you've seen a ghost and they would go pale. Oh my God, a ghost. This is fight or flight in action, guys. Fight or flight. I want to get rid of this crap. Action, action, action. Susie, I want to hold on to Susie and never let her go because I'm going to lose her. That's play dead. Fight, flight, or freeze. And that's what the colon was doing. It wanted to hold on to that precious thing. For another person, it was their house. They lost their house to some inheritance, to some other family member that they didn't like or something like that. All the muscles, it doesn't just freeze. It actually expands to hold more stuff. And then the rectum clamps really tight. I hear a lot of people say this, like, oh, my butthole is just clamped tight and nothing will ever come out. And it's because you're subconsciously holding on to something very important to your survival. Maybe it's money. Most of the time, it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend that they're fearful of losing. That's what I normally see. So that's constipation. Don't let any holistic idiot make you think it's the gut microbiome or anything like that. It is the intestinal muscles, which is controlled from your brain. Leaky gut. This is a holistic term that really hasn't been recognized by modern medicine. It's a pretty crap term, if you ask me. It could mean anything, but its official definition is in the small intestine, there's holes opening up. Toxins get into the bloodstream and the person gets random symptoms and autoimmune disease. So let's put this theory under the test. So let's say I eat bread, right? And I have leaky gut. The undigested gluten goes into my bloodstream. And let's say I have a rash on my arm. Let's say I have a rash on my arm right here. Only here. I don't have a rash anywhere else in my body. The stupid leaky gut theory claims that every time I eat bread or eat anything, it leaks into my bloodstream and the toxins only come out here. If leaky gut was true, I would look like a leper. I would be falling apart and I'd probably die of sepsis really fast. In reality, what's happening, Dr. Hammer discovered this. If everybody who had a rash on their left arm, he would look at their brain CT scan and go, okay, there's something going on there. What happened? When did the rash start? When did that rash start, Mike? Again, I'm not taking shots at my dad. I'm just trying to make stuff up fast. So, like, imagine I'm like a little kid and I got an abusive stepdad or something and he grabbed me. He grabbed me right here. I felt attacked right here. That's where that rash came from, not from frickin' protein. Protein is what this is made out of. I might sound a little wacko when it comes to bashing on the holistic stuff, but I wasted my whole 20s chasing down holistic buffoonery. So celiac disease today means you react to gluten. But before the 1950s, 60s, 70s, celiac is Greek for abdominal. So if you had any digestive issues, they usually just said, oh, you have celiac disease. They said that for like a very, very, like probably hundreds, if not thousands of years. Then in the 1950s, this doctor from Denmark, either from Belgium or Netherlands or Denmark, I think he was from Denmark, during World War II, he was treating kids. They had bad digestion. He was like the GI doctor for kids in Denmark during World War II when they were occupied by Nazis. So it's safe to say these kids were under a lot of stress. Their parents are probably dead. If not, they probably knew people who died. Their house had been blown up. You know, they had curfews. Their life was a living hell. They were very stressed out. And this doctor was like, somehow got this cockamamie idea in his head that gluten was causing their symptoms. And I even like read his papers. And like at best, his results when taking gluten out of somebody's diet was 50-50. Even today, it is very difficult to live a gluten-free life. Between the peer pressure and feeling left out and having cake on your birthday, it's very hard. Back then, it was almost impossible not to eat gluten. I was talking to somebody the other day and they were Ukrainian, and the Ukraine flag it's the top of the flag is blue and the bottom of the flag is gold and yellow, and it stands for Golden Fields of Wheat. And this person was also Christian, and they were like, oh yeah, I'm gluten intolerant. I'm like, how are you gluten intolerant? You're Ukrainian. Gluten flows through your blood, and you're Christian. It's approved in the Bible. It's called the staff of life in the Bible. It's called the body of Christ in the Bible. How are you allergic to gluten? It literally makes no sense. So you might legitimately react to gluten, but somebody might have hit you upside the head with a stale baguette and thought it was funny, and you looked like, and you looked stupid, you felt embarrassed in front of your friends. That was a conflict involving gluten. Maybe you were a kid and you were forced to eat whole wheat sandwich because your mom wanted to eat healthy and you're like, no, I hate whole wheat bread. That could give somebody a gluten allergy. It's somehow gluten, and we eat bread 100 times a day. If you have a legit gluten allergy, then it's somehow gluten is related to the conflict. But for the vast majority of you, you usually get symptoms and you freak out, you go online, and then they tell you gluten, stop eating gluten, and, stop eating protein, it's not good for you. And then, you're in this state of fear, so you're very suggestible. And that's how I normally see a gluten intolerance form, a celiac. So that's celiac. It's having like a subconscious fear or revulsion to wheat. Stomach ulcers only form here and in the duodenum, like here, the duodenal bulb. They do not form down here. They knew this back in the 1930s. Dr. Burl Crohn, the guy who discovered Crohn's disease, he wrote a book on stomach ulcers, and in the first sentence of the book, he says, somebody with stomach ulcers, they're very stressed out. Let me describe their personality. That is literally the first sentence of his book. And so the way that you know if somebody has stomach ulcers, they usually stick a camera down here and they look around and they see if they can see them. But the problem with this method is, let's say, sometimes you got to wait like 2 weeks to get this procedure done. You might not have symptoms when you get the procedure done. If you have ulcers 2 weeks ago and you happen to just be in a good mood and not be stressed out the next 2 weeks, you go on vacation or something like that, and then you go get your endoscopy, they might not see anything depending on the circumstances. That's a problem with that test. But the first question I ask if I think somebody has stomach ulcers is I say, do you have burning pain? Does it burn when you eat? A burning pain. And so this is going to cover stomach ulcers. We call it heartburn. Stomach ulcers, heartburn, duodenal ulcers. It's kind of hard to tell which is which, but Dr. Hammer said that this is caused by a territorial anger or an identity conflict. I don't know what territory I belong to. So when we're active in the conflict, I had one friend who he was fighting with his landlord, and whenever he was got into a fight with his landlord, which was pretty much like multiple times a week, his heartburn was awful. But a lot of people think is that it's caused by food, but the problem is when you eat something, food smashes into the ulcers, and every time you eat, the stomach makes stomach acid, and then the acid gets smashed into your ulcers, and then it's very easy to blame the food. While you have that burning pain, you want to help neutralize that acid, and foods high in protein neutralize the acid. So things like dairy products like cheese and milk, meat, and bread and beans. Those foods are higher on the protein scale, and the protein, I guess, sucks up and neutralizes the acid. If your stomach is empty, there's like a little bit of acid that sits on the ulcer. So he kind of recommended that you always kind of be alkalizing the area with protein. So, you just snack on a piece of bread throughout the whole day, like white bread or something throughout the whole day. And it just keeps soaking up the acid. So it's not sitting and getting smashed into your ulcers. But the only way to get rid of the ulcers is to resolve the conflict that's putting your stomach in and out of overdrive. And I show you how to do that in my 13-day protocol that's on my, if you like, go to my website and buy my 13-day protocol, and I show you how to find what's putting your gut into overdrive and then how to resolve it. Traumatized brain is pretty tricky. It's something that even like a psychotherapist, like a therapist, a psychiatrist doesn't even know how to do. It's a very specific thing. GERD, acid reflux, and gastritis are all very similar. This area right here gets so beat up, this doesn't close properly and it flows up there. So that's acid reflux and GERD. H. pylori. So during the conflict active phase, it's cell loss, and and that's what causes that burning pain. When the conflict gets resolved, oh, I moved house, and I'm going on vacation. I don't have to deal with my landlord that's being a jerk. Then H. pylori is created by the cells here to aid with the repair of this. Like when that person goes on vacation or their landlord goes on vacation, they don't have to deal with them. Well, like when that happens, things switch gears, right? And they'll feel sick. They'll have a fever. They'll have a headache. And I explain there's so many details I'm leaving out, guys, that I have in my program that's on my website that you can purchase. There's so many details I'm leaving out. Gastritis is also just this going in, what I've been talking about, just going on and off, on and off, on and off. Let's talk about bile acid malabsorption. This is something that I had an issue with. If your diarrhea is very stinky and green and burns and like almost foamy when it comes out, that's also too controlled by a territorial anger or an identity conflict. And what it does is, for me, it was like my parents like yanking me off of video games when I was little. Just a PTSD reminder of somebody shutting off the shower. Because when I was a kid, when the shower went off, that meant mom and dad are out of the shower and they're going to kick us off the video games. And that gets thrown into overdrive. It dumps all the bile into my digestive system. It's very alkaline and irritating. It goes, I'm going to get it out of here. And I get diarrhea. And just recognizing that connection stopped it. All right, so the next one is Crohn's disease, which is what I was diagnosed with. Dr. Burrell Crohn's did not want to call Crohn's disease. He thought it was stupid because it is stupid. When I say Crohn's disease, it could mean inflammation anywhere from mouth to butthole. What does that mean? I would literally have to talk to you for 30 minutes to try to figure out what that means. Dr. Burrell Crohn's wanted to call it regional ileitis. The ileum is the last part of the small intestine. From now on, that's what I'm going to use Crohn's. It's regional ileitis. It's inflammation in the last part of the small intestine. We got to talk about what inflammation is. This is how messed up the holistic and modern medicine community is. They're using goo goo gaga baby language. It's embarrassing. They should be embarrassed that they don't know what inflammation is. They talk about inflammation like it's like this plague that you need to cut off your body. If I punch my arm, it becomes inflamed to heal that damage. Inflammation is your body's response to injury. So if the intestines are inflamed, you need to ask yourself, what is it healing from? What is injuring my intestines over and over and over again? Not, how do I eat anti-inflammatory foods? It sounds literally dumb. My brain is doing a somersault in my head right now. It's so painful to make these sentences because it's so anti-logic. We need to give you anti-inflammatory drugs. Hey, how about you figure out what's injuring my gut so it doesn't have to become inflamed in the first place? That's the question we need to be asking. And what's causing this inflammation is a stressful theme in our life. It's something important to my survival that, maybe it's a girl. She looks good. I even seen girls say this. They'll be like, oh, that boy looks so tasty. Oh, I'm salivating just looking at him. And fun fact, the vaginal mucosa is made out of digestive cells. It's going in and out of overdrive due to something important to our survival we cannot digest and absorb. And it goes in and out, in and out, in and out. The cell proliferation, cell removal, cell extra, cell removals. Back and forth until it turns into a mess. For me, it was like video games and girls in high school. So that's Crohn's disease. There's all these symptoms with Crohn's disease, like hair falling out and perianal fistulas. They're all separate organs, separate conditions that have separate conflicts that put those body parts in and out of overdrive. So colitis is just inflammation of the colon. Now, the colon really doesn't digest that much. It doesn't really digest food. It kind of absorbs water, and just holds crap. So the conflict for the colon is, what is crap I want to get rid of, but I can't. Oh, he's a piece of crap. I can't get him out of my life because we're married or something. Oh, this teacher, I'm stuck with this teacher. He's such a piece of crap. He gives us all this extra crap to do that I don't want to do, but I'm stuck with him for the year. Colitis, when, that person graduates and I don't got to deal with that teacher anymore, but then they're subconsciously haunted by it, and their brain sees PTSD triggers. Every time somebody hands that person a piece of paper, they get diarrhea. Every time somebody yells at them, even when the brain sees somebody yelling at them on the computer, sees somebody yelling on a TV show, he gets diarrhea. That's how stupid these PTSD triggers. I didn't say it was a good design. It's a pretty dumb design, but its purpose is to increase our survival. And this turns into ulcerative colitis just when the intensity of the conflict ups or the time period. And then when it becomes really advanced and someone's really stressed out and it's been going on for a really long time, pockets start to form and they'd get diagnosed with diverticulitis. And then the way that they diagnose colitis is they do a colonoscopy and they look around up here and they see if they see inflammation. With a colonoscopy, they can only get to about here and maybe a little bit into the small intestine. So they can kind of, they could diagnose Crohn's if they see inflammation right here, but usually they diagnose Crohn's with a capsule endoscopy or an MRI. They do a blood test to see if inflammation levels are up, to see if it's worth. It's cheap, it's easy to do, it's quick, and they kind of do it to see like if you're just sick for a little bit, or I don't know. I think they're just honestly trying to bill you, because I mean, it's like, hey, I've had diarrhea for like 3 years. It's like, okay, you have one of these conditions. If they do all these tests, like let's say they do a colonoscopy, they do an endoscopy, they do an MRI, and they like can't really see anything, and you're still having diarrhea and constipation, then they will usually diagnose you with IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, but we don't see any inflammation. We also have hemorrhoids and fissures. A fissure is when you have burning pain in the butt. So here's another thing I forgot to mention about up here. Sometimes they'll stick the endoscopy down here and they won't see anything because the ulcers will be so small. They're still there and they still cause the burning pain, but they're so small you don't see it. And the same thing can happen down here with fissures. They could look down there in your butt and not see anything, but it's still burning down here. And don't get this mixed up with this coming down and it's alkaline, it's super alkaline, and you're like pooping bleach. So this is an identity territorial anger conflict. I don't know what territory I belong to. There'll be like a cut there, but it won't be inflamed. It's very interesting to have a cut that's not inflamed. So it does cell loss in the conflict active phase. That's the biological purpose of that is to widen our butt so we can fart and poop on our territory better. So, hey, get off my territory. That's my poop you're smelling. It's to aid with that. And then hemorrhoids come in to heal that cell loss, to repair cell restoration. And they turn into these big, nasty blobs that itch. There's itching when the conflict gets resolved, and there's burning pain when we're conflict active. Burning pain when my landlord's yelling at me. Then he goes on vacation, or the next door neighbor runs over him. Woohoo! Now it turns into an itch. Oh my God, my butt is itching so bad. The type of pain will change. Then we have a perianal fistula, which is what I had, and so that comes from the perianal ducts. And essentially what happens first, that's what's something crappy I couldn't get rid of fast enough. That's the conflict for that. But again, it's cell loss and cell restoration. And when the conflict's on and off, an abscess forms that pus needs to go out somewhere and a fistula gets created. Perianal fistulas are a little bit tricky to fix. I actually had to get surgery done for that. But for my Crohn's and colitis and bile acid malabsorption symptoms, I didn't do any surgeries. I don't take any drugs. I show you what I did in my program. So, just go to my website and buy it. And like literally before you get blood test results back, like you could literally cut your symptoms in half, and probably for cheaper. I don't know how much blood tests are nowadays. Yesterday I took somebody, like my next door neighbor had to go to the hospital, and he was a nurse. He paid like $6,000. It was crazy. And it's like, you think they'd give him a break because he's a fellow nurse, and they didn't do anything. He didn't stay the night. They ran a few tests. It's crazy how expensive it was. Even if you don't have a diagnosis, you're not sure what you have. You have diarrhea, blood, mucus in your stool. Blood and mucus in the stool is usually colitis, because if there's bleeding in the small intestine, it usually gets like reabsorbed or becomes like really dark, same with the mucus. So if somebody has like really fresh looking mucus and blood, it's normally colitis or sometimes proctitis. Proctitis is right here, and proctitis is usually just the fissures and the hemorrhoids getting out of control.